Unfortunately, the Senate has session today. So we're going to be in a position where senators probably will not be here to present their bills. So I might ask some of you to just introduce the bills, and then we can allow um, members of the public that are going to be speaking for and against. So at least we can start this. Um, and then we have an exec session next Wednesday on these four bills. We may, I'll explain the first bill in a moment here, what the situation is. We have a pretty simple bill from from Senator D'Alessandro, Senate Bill 276, and there's been an amendment which I emailed to you from Senator Gaida. So we're going to kind of explain what's going on and what our options are here as a committee. All right, I'd like to introduce Representative, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll?
Infantine,
Yes, here.
Seaworth, Avaloni, Callum, myself, yeah, Love, Warden, Turcott, Kraut, Boyd, Huff, Sullivan, Susie, Rudy, Cahill, Di Silvestro, Schmidt,
Here.
Toomey, Bouchard,
Here.
Adjutant,
Here.
Mandeville,
Thank you. I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 276, and I recognize Representative Abrami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, State Rep. Pat Abrami, Rockingham 19. And I'm also Vice Chair of Ways and Means, which is relevant to this discussion, and also chair the Tax Expenditure Review Committee, a joint committee with the Senate, and it's also relevant to this discussion. So let's first talk about the Army, Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute. Army, we passed a bill 4 years ago that gave tax breaks to businesses. Well, let me explain what Army is. Army received a $60 million grant. Dean Kamen received a $60 million grant from the Department of Defense to develop and to bring to market and manufacture body parts, body organs like kidneys. The thought then was that all the science is there. It's hidden in every basement of every academic medical center around the country, was to create this ecosystem where he was would be able to attract businesses, onesie-twosie businesses with PhDs that specialize in a little piece of this and a little piece of that, bring them together to the mill yard where he has his facilities. Now, that was 4 years ago. And so we passed the bill, and there was two components of the bill. One was 10-year tax breaks for any business that came. He said the reason why he came to the legislature to ask for this is that after he got that $60 million grant, every state came after him saying, don't do it in New Hampshire, come to us. They made him big offers to move out of the state, move this out of the state. And he loves New Hampshire. He didn't want to move. He said to the state, you got to help us. And he asked for two things. He asked for some tax breaks for these small companies moving in. 10 years. No, so if a company moves in doing this stuff, so now we're 4 years in. So if a company moves in now, that would be 6 years of tax breaks. Okay. Now this is something we don't do very often, to give tax breaks, but we did this. The second part was he asked for a tuition forgiveness for these people coming in. And that was to be managed by the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority. And we created a where is it? I gotta get my glasses here. It's called the State Regenerative Manufacturing Workforce Development Fund. So so that's the big picture. So now we're 4 years in. Senator D'Alessandro, in the fall, presented the underlying bill, which you have. In the original language of the bill, it was of the bill that we passed 4 years ago, it said that the authority, the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, was supposed to report annually to the fiscal committee. Now, for 4 years, and Representative Almy will attest to this as well, we haven't seen anything from anybody. Matter of fact, we've been asking questions. I wonder how Army's doing. But Senator D'Alessandro, who's on Ways and Means in the Senate, put an amendment in, or a bill in, to say, let's also report to House Ways and Means and Senate Ways and Means. And that it said report every 6 months, so he put specific dates, September 1st and March 1st, which Ways and Means, we want that. And so I'll for the committee, yes, definitely pass the underlying bill. It provides us the information that we've been looking for the last 4 years. So let me put my other hat on now. So just a week, I'm chair of the Tax Expenditure Review Committee. What does that do? Well, we have like 7 tax credits that we give. Let me give you an example. Community Development Finance Authority, new investment tax credit, economic revitalization zone tax credit, research and development tax credit, Coos County job creation tax credit, education tax credit, career and technical career center tax credit, and now exemption for qualified regenerative manufacturing companies. So that's 7 of them. So what this little committee does is just me, Representative Ames, and Senator Gaida are on this review committee. Every 2 years, we look at all these credits to see what's going on, who's using them, how much money's being spent, and making the decision whether these credits should continue and make recommendations. So we finally got around to Army. Last week and a half ago, we had one of these meetings, and we had James Key Wallace from the Business Finance Authority come and testify, and as well as Maureen Toohey from Army. So he went first. He said, "Well, so how we doing with the education tuition part?" And he testified that, well, we got the rules done, we got everything done. I said, "Oh, great. So how much has gone out so far?" "Nothing." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, we haven't funded it." So there's no funding in it. So the amendment, and then I looked to my right, I looked at Senator Gaida, and I said, "Is that news to you?" He goes, "Yes." And I looked to Representative Ames, "Is that news to you?" "Yes." No one took care of the funding part. So Senator Gaida said, "I'll take care of it." And he developed this amendment that's before you, well, not before you, it was emailed to you, asking for $1 million to go into this fund. Now, was this the right bill to have it go? It relates because it really is an Army bill. But I talked to Karen, the Chair of Finance, Representative Umberger, and she says, "No, put it on House bill, Senate bill, another Senate bill, and we'll make sure it gets." They're in agreement with the $1 million, by the way, in finance. But here we are with the bill, and I think I talked to Karen Umberger this morning again, and she says, "No, go ahead and pass it. We'll make sure it somehow winds up in finance, that they can bless it, because this is not an FN bill." And she said she'd be talking to the speaker and making sure that it does go to a second committee to be approved. So I ask you to approve the underlying bill, and I also ask that you approve the $1 million appropriation. And that's my testimony. I'll take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Representative Brahmi. Representative Cahill.
Good morning, my friend from Strata.
Yep.
Could you tell me if there have been any inquiries about the tuition? Have there been people applying for it and being told there's no money?
Well, that's when the executive director of Army came, Maureen was next on in that committee who spoke. I asked that question. I have a feeling they haven't done a very good job of advertising that fact, which But then she talked about the fact that they just are completing another 25,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and that they are continuing to recruit. They are continuing to try to recruit others to come. That this would be helpful if we did fund this. So we agreed. So let's try to fund this.
Representative Wharton, oh,
Thank
you have a follow-up, Representative Cahill? Follow-up, and then Representative Wharton.
In the event that there are no takers, can we put the money someplace else?
Yes, that's what happens with, in Ways and Means, we have a what do you call it, dedicated fund review committee that works. Actually, Representative Almey's on this with Representative Major and a few others from the Senate and others. So we look every, there's a lot of dedicated funds. Actually, there's 300 dedicated funds. So they need to be monitored to say, okay, is this fund dead? Is this what's going on? And we monitor. I'm sure they'll put this one on the list in a couple of years just to see if that money and then we actually do, we form a bill that you may or may not, because usually it's unanimous. It's generally on consent calendar, so you guys don't see this, but that we do say, close down this fund. We say, any money left in that fund, go back to the general fund or wherever, generally the general fund. So we do track that.
Representative Wharton.
Thank you. Just as a clarification, on that tax credit, is it against business profits tax and business enterprise tax?
Yeah, both BPT and BET. So the other part of our meeting, we talked to again, it appears that so far they've attracted, they say, okay, we go to the Department of Revenue and say, well, how many? We know it's under 10 because they won't tell us. Their rule is they won't give us any taxpayer information if it's under 10, which is their rule, which is probably appropriate to try to protect the businesses. And they feel, under 10, we can kind of work backwards and figure out who's who. So that's fine. So we know it's under 10. But she said there's probably 6 businesses that have come that can take advantage of it, using that BP. But she wasn't sure if they are. She says they probably aren't. Again, when we passed this, we knew one thing, that all these small businesses weren't going to be making a profit for a while. So we weren't too concerned about the BPT, bankrupting the state. Actually, it's going to create more in 10 years. We're going to reap the benefits of this with increased business. But they have to pay BET again. But she wasn't sure whether they were filing with the DRA, and again, we can't get it out of the department. We have a very close working relationship with the Department of Revenue, just like you have a good working relationship with the Department of Labor. And they would tell us, and I even went to the commissioner to try to get more out of her. She says, no. So, yeah, but not to answer your question.
Representative Sullivan.
Looking at the amendment, it indicates that it's non-lapsing. Does that mean that the $1 million
Goes year to year.
it moves from one year to another, or it's
No, it moves one year to another.
And is there another $1 million appropriated every year?
No, we're just appropriating 1 million.
1 million period.
Right. Actually, in the original bill, we gave the Business Finance Authority also the ability to bond money up to 5 million. That's not. I don't think that's going to happen. But we thought the 1 million was enough. If we see that there's activity, and that we may come back to the legislature again and ask for additional funding. But again, all of this ends in 10 years, okay? And we're into year 4 already, so there's 6 years left.
Representative Avaloni. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for taking the question. Should we have a 6-year sunset on this fund for the $1 million? So it only goes for 10 years, and we're already into year 4.
You could do that, but I think we'll take care of it. I think we're under the clock to try to get this passed at this point. You know what I mean? It's. I think that at that point in time we'll know the final 6 years is up, and we'll I know in Ways and Means we'll make sure that if we're all here, But we'll make sure that fund ends then.
Follow up?
I lost it. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I would assume, Representative, that since this whole bill, it was initiated with 10 years, everything would stop at the end of the 10 years, including this fund. Is that-
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions? Representative Avalani, any second remembrance? Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you. Seeing as if we adopt this amendment, we don't usually have the ability to appropriate funds, so would this make it an FN bill? To make sure that it goes to a second committee?
Oh, so, want me to say that? Yeah, it does make it an FN bill, and I've been, the last 2 days, I've been maneuvering around trying to convince them not to have it come here, have it go to finance, the amendment. And I talked to I said earlier, Representative Umberger this morning. She said she'll be talking to the speaker that it will go to finance.
Yes. It is the speaker's prerogative. Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Abrami. Are there any other industries that we have favored in this way?
No. This was a long and hard discussion 4 years ago. And this was an opportunity. I mean, Dean Kamen's quite a salesman. And he he said this is going to be the renaissance of the Manchesters. You know, we're going to go from our history of being a mill, you know, of 100 years ago being Milltown, textile capital of the world. He views this as being the regenerative medicine capital of the world here. I guess we all bought into that, and we'll see. It was one that we kept on saying to ourselves, how much of a risk is it really going to be in terms of to the taxpayer of giving these tax breaks? And it's turning out to be not that much. And like I said earlier, knowing that these startups are not going to be making big profits anyway. So we said, I think this is something that we do. This could be big. This is cutting edge stuff. And it passed the House and the Senate pretty handily as well. So, and the governor obviously supported it back then. So.
Last follow-up, and then we're going to get Senator D'Alessandro, who might be able to answer some questions. But go ahead with your follow-up, Representative Cahill.
I was thinking that people who are working in this field probably have very advanced degrees and would probably command a high salary. So is there as much of a need to help pay off their student loans as there might be for other people in other industries?
Well, yeah, thank you. Good question. Yeah, a lot of them have PhDs. But when they get more towards the development of the manufacturing processes, it's more technical level people that they want to bring in, so that there'd be some of these education credits would go to lower level, if you will, technical people that will need to be trained in the processes that they come up with at that other level. Because this is all about, and the reason the Department of Defense came in is for one reason. They said, you know how to get things done. You know how to get manufacturing going, and this is why it's manufacturing. It's manufacturing institute. It's trying to take the science and create the product, but then how do you manufacture it? By the way, they're talking about basically using 3D printing. We're talking about 3D printing, you know, kidneys and livers and whatever else. And we're there, and we're getting close. We're getting close. So.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to next call Senator D'Alessandro.
Oh.
Representative Alvey has a pressure for a committee. So sure, if that's all right, Representative Almy, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to be pretty quick, I hope. On well, first, we asked a lot of really hard questions about this project. It took a long time. They thought I was trying to kill it. I was trying to make sure that this was going to work one of the things that they were working on from the beginning is lungs, building new lungs. And they have actually done a fair amount of experimental transplants into human beings who had no other alternative to this one already. They're not there quite yet, but that is kind of the peak of this work. Is lungs are incredibly complicated, but these are startups, and startups are mostly run by young, recent PhDs straight out of the most advanced trainings with new, bright ideas nobody had before. And what they're doing is merging biological science with mechanical engineering. And it still has it's been slow setting up. It still has the possibility of exploding into something huge, such as we had back in the late 70s, 80s in this state. And so we decided that we were going to fund that, but we did not have the money to fund the tuition grants for this. And we asked Key Wallace, the new head at that point of the Business Finance Authority, to go out and try to raise the money from donors. And if he raised enough from donors, they were going to bond the $5 million. He cannot bond the $5 million that they were asking for without having some kind of backup of how do we pay for this later. He's a bank. So that didn't work out. I don't know how much effort he put into it. We did not have the money at that point to be able to do that, and we certainly couldn't bond it through the regular bonding process because it had already been taken up. It was the second year of the biennium. It was 5 years ago. So that's why it ended up not being funded. Most people had forgotten that since then. But we do have the money this year. The Finance Committee is willing to take care of it as long as they don't have to pay anything in the future. And that's what the bill in front of you does. It says non-lapsing means that we aren't going to take the money back away from you if you haven't finished spending it yet. But it doesn't say we're going to give you another $1 million next year. So I hope that clears up that part of it.
Thank you. Any questions, Representative Warden?
Thank you. Two-part question. This amendment that they're asking for is for the current fiscal year ending June 30th of this year. So it goes back in time 2 years, right? It's the budget we passed 2 years ago. Is that correct?
No, the Army passed 5 years ago, actually, but came into effect 4 years ago.
Follow up, but the budget that this is appropriation for is the current budget that
Yeah.
we're just finishing up, correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay, follow up. And this amendment refers to section 162-T3, which was when the Army Regenerative thing was originally set up, the credit, tax credit scheme.
Mm-hmm.
But in that chapter, it says for repayment of student loan dues, I'll quote, "No forgiveness of such student indebtedness shall be effected unless the person shall have been employed to perform primarily active regenerative manufacturing business activities at a location within New Hampshire for a minimum period of 5 years." So if we haven't even been into it 5 years, what's the rush? Why couldn't we put it in next year's budget? Because nobody could even ask for student loan indebtedness repayment until next year.
That is quite easy. Our committee is very worried that the money coming in next year is going to be nothing like the money coming in that has come in this year. And we also know that we owe back a large amount of money to taxpayers that they have left with us on deposit. On some of it is because they paid taxes on their P loans from the federal government, and every other state was was telling them, you don't have to pay taxes on that. We had to pass a law to do that. It took a long time. They paid the taxes before we did that. We have to give that money back. We thought they were going to start, they may be giving it, asking for it right now, some of them. We have no idea how much of it is going to have to be paid back in each year, but the total of it is perhaps $90 million. That's a big problem. And we also have $300 million on account in something called credit carry forward, which we just finally, it has been exploding. It was 100 million 10 years ago. 4 years ago, it was 200 million, and now it is over 300 million. And they can come back at any time and say, we don't want to keep this on deposit with you anymore. We want it back. So we've been talking for quite a long time, led by our chair, Norman Major, has been most insistent on this, about taking figuring out a way to reduce that to something more manageable. Part of it is, half of it, we think, is just I put this here and I'm going to be using it all this year and it will be gone by the end of this year. The other half is it's been there a while and those companies are still here. So we started doing something about that in the current budget. And it was a signal to the companies that if you don't start taking this money back, you're going to have to take it back all at once. And we think the reason that they've kept it here is that it's cheaper than taking it back and paying taxes on it to the federal government. So that they may start asking for more of that back. And most people think we're probably headed into a recession. We don't know what kind of recession. So we don't want to depend on having a lot of money next year.
So you're all set, Representative Warden? Okay, Representative Sullivan.
Representative Almy, you and I have been having some discussions about this bill and about the fact that it's rather bizarre that the bill is in this committee. It ought to be either in Ways and Means or in Finance, or both. But I guess I would suggest to my Labor Committee colleagues that we stay in our lane, get out of the way, and just move this bill on to the Finance Committee so they can take care of it. This is really not our area necessarily.
Thank you.
I will accept your advice over the phone that this bill needs to move forward. The amendment needs to move forward, and we ought to just get her done. So,
Would you believe?
Would you believe? Yes.
Right. Yes, I just, while I'm here, I want to thank Senator D'Alessandro for putting this in. It is simply a Ways and Means bill. It was in the Senate and it should have been here, but I don't know how you got it. But now we've all learned something. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Almy. Senator D'Alessandro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's been a very interesting presentation, I might say. I come before you as the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 276. It was a very simple bill. As has been iterated, I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 3, 4, 10, 11 in the town of Goffstown. I was on Ways and Means when we passed this bill 4 years ago. The purpose of the bill was such. We had a new concept that was being developed. It was called Regenerative Manufacturing. The Department of Defense gave Dean Kamen and DECA $90 million to create a not-for-profit that would eventually get into the business of regenerative manufacturing. What did that mean? That means hearts, pancreases, lungs, livers could be regenerated. They're currently working on the heart as we speak. I was a sponsor of the bill. The rationale for the bill was it was going to save millions and millions of dollars because the troops coming back have very significant medical problems. They lose their limbs. There are other medical problems. This particular regenerative situation could address some of those, make their lives better, and also save millions of dollars, which go on ad infinitum or until the death of the individual. So it made good sense. So what was the plan? The plan was, what about the BPT and the BET? Could we suspend payment of the BPT and the BET for 10 years so that this program could get a very solid start? The 90 million was part of the deal. Then they would go out and they would sell, let's call it stock, to different companies so that they would join in. And about 250 entities have joined in this process. One way or another, they're aiding the process in its development. So I visited them, and I said, gee, it seems to me we asked for a report on how things were going. And I've never seen that report. So I've sent an email every month asking for the report. I've not seen it. The genesis of the bill. Let's make sure that a report comes. We're doing a good service for them, a remarkable service, to be honest with you. The suspension of the BPT and the BET for 10 years was an adventure. All right, it's something that really you had to take a strong look at. But in return, we should get a report on how things are going. So I visited. They are expanding the lab. They are using the lab at UNH. They're expanding the lab. All of these things are in place. But what's the progress? And that, in essence, is the genesis of my piece of legislation and the reporting periods that should come to the legislature, come to Ways and Means, and come to Finance in both the House and the Senate. We took a very adventuresome step forward. We should get an accounting of what's going on. There may be others who'll come for this and try to take advantage of this situation. We'll have some record. We'll have of how things went the first time we did it and what the positive results are. So therein is again, the genesis of the legislation and why this piece of legislation is before you. Now, with regard to the loan repayment, we already do loan repayment in a couple of areas. Bi-State Primary Care does it for doctors who come to rural areas, and there's another one at HHS for a loan for loan repayment. So the question was, is it being done? Yes, it's being done. Are we exercising it at this point in time? We just can't get any people now. Never mind pay loans. We can't find people. We can't find people to pay the loans back for. But I think it's essential that this committee, or whoever you send it to, pass the bill, because we need a very very significant report on a by legislative basis, or every 6 months, as to what's going on. And we want Manchester to be the center of regenerative manufacturing. We have an opportunity to lead the nation, if not the world. I mean, Cayman has been brilliant in many of his adventures. And I think the insulin pump, it has to be the crowning glory of his achievements. Never mind the Segway and the wheelchair and so forth. But he's done some remarkable things. This gives an opportunity for more remarkable things. And that, Mr. Chairman, is my rationale for producing the bill. And I'll be happy to answer any queries that anybody has with regard to the legislation.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions for the Senator? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention. And appreciate your support. And I don't know where it's going, but at least an ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak on behalf of House Bill 276 or against? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 276 and move on to the rest of our agenda. I do not have any pink cards on Senate Bill 377 FN relative to the eligibility of certain injuries for state troopers or for workers' compensation. I need a Representative Cahill. Would you please take the chair and just as a member of the legislature, introduce House Bill 377. Senator. Yes, I apologize, Chantel. My apologies. Chantel Wheeler on behalf of Senator Carson.
Thank you. Oh. My name is Chantel Wheeler, and I am pleased to be here on behalf of Senator Sharon Carson, who represents Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Auburn, and Hudson. I'm here to present for your consideration Senate Bill 377. As amended, this bill creates a presumption that an injury is occupationally caused if it occurs while a state trooper is operating a state police vehicle in the performance of their official duties. The language of this bill deals with a current gap in the law regarding workers' compensation for our troopers on the road. Due to a change in contracts, command staff are not recognized as being paid until they arrive at headquarters, even though they may be in uniform and fully marked cars, and they may have to answer calls on their drive-in. In a similar vein, when troopers do extra duty details like working a construction job on the highway or Hampton Beach, these troopers do not get paid for the commute to the site. A concern has been raised that during the commute time, if an officer is injured in an accident or by some other manner because they are not viewed under the law as on duty at the time, then that injury may not be covered by workers' compensation. This bill addresses that by creating a presumption that if a trooper is operating a cruiser and in their uniform on the way to state function, they will be covered under workers' compensation. And that concludes my introduction, and I thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Warden.
You may know the answers, but thanks for taking the question. Are there some troopers that take their state police vehicles home with them?
Yes.
Follow up.
Follow-up. If a state trooper were, since some of them can take them home with them, he finishes up the day working and then continues in his vehicle, his or her vehicle, to have dinner and a few drinks, and then on the way home from the restaurant or bar crashes, would this bill give that person coverage regardless of the cause of the accident or the level of sobriety in this hypothetical situation of the trooper?
Regrettably, I'm not able to answer that, but I know there are experts in the industry behind me who are here to do that, and I would prefer to defer to them.
No problem. I didn't want to put you on the spot. Thank you.
Representative
for your
Warden, we have
question.
someone coming from this New Hampshire Troopers Association afterwards that can answer some of those specifics. But I would gather that they have to report from their job right to their home, not stopping at restaurants or bars. I'm just going to go on the limb and say that, but we'll wait and
Well,
hear.
let's see what they say.
We're going to wait and hear what Brian Ross has to say in a moment. Chantel, or I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't need to use by your first name, Ms. Wheeler. It is my understanding that the current now you said it was about a contract, correct?
Yes,
Because
that was
current New Hampshire law, if someone's driving with a company vehicle from their home to their job site, okay, that there is coverage under most circumstances, not necessarily to their office to just check in and then go to a job site, but right to their job. Was there a situation such as the unfortunate trooper that got killed on 93 or 95 when he was at a duty? Was there a situation that has occurred that you're aware of where coverage was denied?
I am not aware.
Okay, I'll ask the next speaker. Are there any other questions for Ms. Wheeler? Seeing none, thank you very much
Thank you for your
for
time.
introducing the bill and your testimony. I'd like to introduce Brian Ross, New Hampshire Troopers Association. We're going to grill him something fierce.
Good morning.
Good morning, welcome.
I am Brian Ross. I'm here to represent the New Hampshire Troopers Association. I've been with the state police for over 14 years now. And just to start off with Rep. Warden's question, we are not allowed to consume any kind of alcoholic beverages while we are on duty, nor are we allowed to use our state police cruisers when we are in an off-duty capacity. So the situation of stopping at a restaurant on the way home, and I think you said having a few drinks with dinner or something along those lines, our policies and procedures forbid us from doing that. And just to reiterate what was already said with the introduction of the bill, I have the opportunity to work off-duty construction details or extra duty details, and there's been numerous times where I have been traveling to or from that extra duty detail where I was the closest unit to an active call on the radio, and I had to respond there before the duty unit could get there and start handling the situation. Just speaking with another trooper this morning, he talked about just a couple days ago being at an extra duty detail on 93 in Concord, and he was traveling home from that detail and responded to the Canterbury rest area for a medical call, and he was the first one there before any on-duty units could get there just because of his proximity to that location. And I only bring that up just because traveling to and from our extra duty details or the command staff traveling to and from headquarters, there are many times when technically we're considered to be in an off-duty status, but we're called to act in an on-duty capacity to align with our job duties as a state trooper, as we are in full uniform at the time and in a state police car. To answer your question, Representative Infantine, sorry if I
No worries.
mispronounced the
It's been a lot worse.
pronunciation of your name. I don't personally know of a situation where a trooper wasn't covered. This is to ensure that we are covered if that situation did occur. And going back to Staff Sergeant Sherrill's situation where he was killed on I-95 in an automobile accident, he was working in a capacity of a construction detail. So it's my understanding that he was covered as a line of duty injury in that situation.
Excellent. Are there any questions for Mr. Ross? Representative Mandeville?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, and forgive the naivete of this question, but are there any state troopers who are not required in the context of their employment to be in uniform, such that they might lose the presumption that's covered by this bill because while they're in the vehicle, they're not in a uniform?
Yes, but in that situation, for example, I'm a detective, so I drive to and from the office. I'm not in a uniform, but I'm considered in an on-duty status at that time. The situations that we're looking to have covered typically would be in a uniform capacity, but either way, we're just looking to have the off-duty status be covered by workman's comp.
Follow-up?
Well, as I read the proposed bill, it requires for the presumption to kick in the operating of the police vehicle and wearing the uniform of the day. I'm not entirely sure whether that works an unintended disadvantage.
Okay. And just to clarify what uniform of the day means to me, if you're a uniform trooper, whether it be command staff or a trooper, The class B or C, B being the long sleeve winter uniform, or C being the summer uniform, that would be the uniform of the day. But also for detectives who wear plain clothes, their uniform of the day is the plainclothes dress of, yeah, shirt and tie and jacket. So
Representative, oh, okay. Representative Avalani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking the questions. Probably gonna be a couple. So the troopers take their cars home and report to work. When do they sign in for their job and sign out? When they get home, or when they're actually, their shift is over?
for the majority of troopers, it's when you leave your house in your cruiser, we sign on via radio, and then we sign off via radio when we get back home at our house. So for the majority of troopers, you're on duty when you leave your driveway in the state police car, and you're off duty when you get back home. The difference is for those extra duty details, when we're traveling to and from the construction site, we are technically in an off-duty capacity, and that is the concern. So you're really signing into those jobs when you're meeting up with the contractor, wherever that extra duty detail is.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
What if it is not an off-duty detail? Say you're attending a funeral out of state, and you're attending a funeral in a different part of the state. You're in your uniform with your assigned car. Would this, as this is written, at least to me, you would be covered under workman's comp if you sustained an injury outside of your normal operations of your vehicle?
Yes, I suppose that would be another situation where you could be in an off-duty capacity and traveling to or from a funeral. That would have to be approved in order for us to do those things. The director would have to approve us to be in uniform and travel to or from a funeral or a wake or whatever the ceremony is in the state car. So I guess that would be another situation where we could be in an off-duty capacity, being in uniform and traveling to or from a funeral. I can also say that in funerals that I've attended in the past, the director or the colonel has indicated that whoever wants to attend this funeral, it could be a duty day. So sometimes we're allowed to modify our schedule if we were on a day off in order to attend a funeral or that kind of ceremonial proceeding in an on-duty capacity.
Follow-up,
Follow-up?
if I could?
Yes.
So do other uniformed officers do the same type of on-duty, off-duty when they're doing extra details? Like we see county sheriffs, or we see other officers in other towns doing the same, construction jobs or monitoring wires or something like that. Should this be only for state troopers, or should we be looking to expand this to other departments that do the same type of?
I don't want to pretend to have knowledge about the sheriff's department or local departments' detail policies and whether or not they get paid traveling to or from those extra duty details. So I don't want to comment on that, but I could see that there may be other organizations who have that same issue of wanting their employees to be covered traveling to or from these extra duty details in a state vehicle or in a county or town vehicle.
Thank you. Thank you for taking questions.
Representative Seaworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. I want to follow up on you mentioned the ceremonial detail. Is that also a case where if you're on an off-duty ceremonial detail and something occurs, could that officer be called upon to respond to a situation, or is that a different animal than what we're talking about with the construction details?
I would say yes, because if we're in the work car and especially when we're in uniform, our policies and procedures indicate that we are expected to take appropriate action.
Thank you. Mr. Ross, in addition, you would be traveling to training, going to the gun range and all those other things as well, correct? That could necessarily be driving to there or back, that for training that necessarily isn't, before your duty shift would start.
So in those situations, though, where we are traveling, let's say to the gun range for training, we're in an on-duty capacity already.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Ross? Representative Warden.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the call. Are troopers allowed to take civilian passengers in their car? Let's say they finish their shift and then go to pick up a spouse or from work or a child from school. Are they allowed to do that in their trooper vehicles?
We aren't supposed to use our vehicles in an off-duty capacity. Whether or not you can pick up a spouse or a family member in the state vehicle, I believe, and I don't have the policy in front of me, but I believe you need to get prior authorization to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I see no further questions. Mr. Ross, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
I saw District Commissioner Ogden pulling a pink card. Was that for this hearing or another one? Okay, would you like to speak at all, Mr. Commissioner? No? All right. Always like to hear from Rudy. Do you have a question for the Commissioner? Would you mind please coming to the podium, please, for a question from Mr. Avalani? Be gentle. We gotta go with our agenda here. We gotta get cracking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Have you had listening to the testimony, do you think there would be issues if we pass this to expand it to just state troopers?
I'm not sure, and I would defer to perhaps others more familiar with law enforcement in general. My understanding is that certain municipalities, they don't take the vehicles home, so I don't know that it's as much of an issue. So again, similar to Mr. Ross's testimony, I don't know that I'm informed enough to offer, whether that's a problem that exists or not.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak on Senate Bill 377 FN? Seeing none, I will close the hearing and try to get back on track for my mom. Senate Bill 209, relative to electronic wage payments. I do not have, Ms. Wheeler is going to. What is that? Okay, I know what it is. Okay, we're cracking. All right, I'd like to call Chantel Wheeler on behalf of Senator Carson, one of the sponsors of the bill. Ms. Wheeler.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I am here on behalf of Senator Sharon Carson from Senate District 14, representing Hudson, Auburn, and Londonderry. I have for your consideration Senate Bill 209, which would amend the statutory provisions related to the payment of an employee's wage by direct deposit. 29 states, including Maine and Massachusetts, have enacted similar legislation, and the committee also heard that 93% of U.S. workers already receive their wages through direct deposit. If a worker does not have a bank account, then they have an option to receive a payroll card. There are no fees associated with a payroll card unless an out-of-network ATM is used, and they are not subject to overdraft or non-sufficient fund fees. The committee amendment established a process for an employee to be provided their wages when they cannot access them due to a technical or processing defect. This addressed a concern raised by the Department of Labor, especially in circumstances where employees cannot access funds from their payroll card. In addition, a change was made to RSA 275-43-2C to ensure consistency in the statute. And that concludes my introduction.
Do you have any questions for the presenter? The chairman does. Line 17 on page 1. refers to line 15 having to do with an employee unable to access their wages due to technical or processing defect. And then in line 19, in such a situation, the employer shall be liable for late payment of wages whenever the replacement wages are provided under the designated pay after the designated payday. So my question in my voicemail to the senator was, well, if this is a bank problem, bank had a hiccup, why is the employer responsible for late payments? And what is a late payment? Does this mean that one of your employees has direct payment off of their checking account every month, and if a payment's late and those payments all go out and the money's not there, then there are going to be bounce check fees, late fees, penalties, and such. So it's just a little too vague for me, and that's where I kind of like to understand what this means.
I thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that, and I would need to defer.
Okay. Respectfully to the senator, we're going to kind of need to know a little more specifics on that. As it is now, I'm uncomfortable with just giving it a thumbs up. Other than that, I'm okay with the bill as is. I think it's unfortunately upon us to think of the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything we write and how it's going to be interpreted. Are there any other questions for the presenter? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. I'd like to call Deputy Commissioner Ogden from the New Hampshire Department of Labor. The man with the answers.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Infantine and committee. For the record, my name is Rudy Ogden. I'm Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Labor. I did want to start just in terms of context. Some of the folks who have been part of the committee for some time knows that when these bills or bills related to pay cards have come up in the past, the department has historically had concerns relative to payment processes or payment platforms such as pay cards being mandated. Those concerns have principally been based in three areas. And some of these areas are really policy decisions that the committee needs to make relative to their feelings on these types of platforms. But in terms of what the concerns are or have been, first is the idea of choice, the issue of whether someone should be compelled to take payment on a pay card or not. I would note that this bill does say that the individual would have the ability to say, I want payment via direct deposit. It would be in instances in which they cannot or do not set up direct deposit that they can be pushed to the platform of pay cards. One thing we do have to remember, though, is that there is a number of folks, and I think the number is larger than we sometimes think, who are what they would call unbanked. And when you talk about folks who are unbanked, they are folks who are, for whatever reason, sometimes it's choice, sometimes it's inability or lack of financial literacy. They do not have the wherewithal to set up bank accounts and do things of that nature. Those folks, generally, the department has always had concerns with is that typically, and this is a gross generalization, but typically in the department's experience, a lot of times the folks who are unbanked are the lower wage earners. So there has been this heightened concern of lower wage earners on a pay card being subject to fees. That brings us to the second concern. So if the first is choice, whether they should have the choice or not, the second being fees, I would be clear that this language in this says that they should be able to withdraw at least one time per pay period for the full balance of their pay without fee. So if that's happening, that is no different than now the idea that you should be able to go and cash a check without a fee at a financial institution. So the language of the bill does say that, and the language of pay cards has said that for some time. I would just point out that sometimes the use of these pay cards, and I did get a question from one of the representatives, Representative Schmidt had talked about the various programs. There are a whole host of pay card programs or platforms out there. The department does not understand to have an encyclopedic recall on how all of them work. Some of them do have a lot of fees, and when I talk about fees, they talk about fees relative to transfers, fees relative to using them as debit cards or other things of that nature. But this does say that they should at least have a fee-less opportunity for the person to withdraw their full payment. That's very important in any instance in which a pay card did not provide that, it would be in violation of this, whether this amendment goes forward or not, or this bill goes forward or not. The last concern that the department has had, and I think this somewhat speaks to Representative Infantine, your questions related to that language that was inserted, is when we testified in the Senate, we did bring up that there have been instances when we've dealt with pay cards where the problem has been access. So the employer has a pay card, they have a pay card that they give to their employees. Even employees might, at present, they're choosing to be on the pay card. And when they go to use it, they can't, it's not working. And then when they go to the pay card, they go to their employer, they say, hey, I can't get my payment. The employer says, deal with the pay card company. I don't deal with that. You know, I've paid it, you deal with the pay card company. Sometimes then they go deal with the pay card company and they're like, well, there's a problem with what your employer has done or not done. And I think the intent of the language here, I understand what you're saying is that it's somewhat broad, but the intent of the language here is to just make very plain that if there was a late payment because the payment process did not work, the employer would be expected to make that individual whole and timely. They should be doing it timely. We've had these examples or instances in which someone has been waiting for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks for the pay card stuff to sort itself out. And the person is at that point going unpaid for some significant period of time. So certainly I think the language could be, you know, tightened or made more explicit in what we're talking about, but I think that was what the intent was. And I don't mean to speak for the senator, but I believe that when Senator Susi was looking to add an amendment to the initially offered language, that was the concern, was this access, the idea that there have been instances in which employees have said, I can't get the pay card to work. The employer's not helping them because they're saying, hey, I've offloaded that. I have a vendor that handles that. Deal with them. And then the vendor is not, we cannot do anything to the vendor. If the payment is late, the Department of Labor has no ability to say to the vendor, pay them on time or get it fixed. So that's kind of where it's come up as a concern. So I'm happy to take any questions. And again, I would just note that we do appreciate some of the changes that have been made to this to really clarify that the employer is expected to make the payment timely and make the individual whole if there are processing problems.
Thank you. Questions, Representative Seaworth?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for testifying on this. My question goes back a number of years. We've heard similar bills in the past, and frequently the issues you alluded to where pay cards have caused problems, particularly for this unbanked segment of the workforce. And my question is, based on the department's experience with those problems, how does it compare with that same segment trying to deal with cashing checks? In other words, my question is it really the case, as has been suggested before, that pay cards tend to have more problems than, say, an unbanked person trying to get their money from a check? Or is the issue really with the unbanked situation rather than the means of trying to pay them?
The biggest issues that we've come across with pay cards, and I'm talking my term with the department's relatively the last 8 years, typically what has come up as problem has been fees. But I do want to be very clear that the fees have not been in the environment of the person was not able to get their payment without a fee at least once. It's that they've used the card. The cards offer a number of different, you can make transfers, you can use it as a debit card. You can do a lot of different things with these cards that are sometimes convenient, but there are costs to those conveniences. And what we have had is we have had instances in which employees have used the cards, they've incurred a number of fees, and then when they've dealt with us, we've looked at it and said, okay, well, you were using it though that way. So it wasn't necessarily, there were a lot of fees, whether they knew that there were going to be all those fees up front. Some of the literature is better than others when you look at certain of what they get when they're onboarded. But again, so we have not seen there be fee problems in the sense of not being able to get the payment at least once if that's what they wanted to do without a fee. The other problem has been choice, where presently the law says that you cannot compel someone to use a pay card. What we have run across in several instances, and it's mainly been employers who are through multiple jurisdictions, so they have a program that they're saying, okay, we've opened in New Hampshire, now we want to start doing this. It's at time of onboard, they're telling the folks, you're on the pay card, and they're not making plain to them that they do or should have the choice to elect a paper check.
All right, thank you. That was very helpful.
Mr. Ogden, do you have any idea how many approximate pay cards are out there? How many employers or how many employees are on a pay card situation?
I don't have that.
Okay. Second, on line 17, in such a situation, the employer shall be liable for late payment of wages. What does that mean?
It means that it would be considered a late payment. So if the person was supposed to get paid on Friday, when they go to use the pay card on Friday, it does not work. If they're not able to access the wages Friday, starting the next day, that's a late payment. We would consider them liable for those late wages. And once they're liable for late wages, it would be expected that they make them whole in the immediate, that they don't wait till the next pay period, that they don't wait till the next pay cycle, that they say, person should have been paid Friday, I need to make them whole as soon as I'm aware of it.
But there aren't any, may I have a follow-up, please, Brian? Thank you. Thank you. That does not mean that is there a labor department fine? Is that liable? Is there, are they liable for, again, for fees that they incurred for maybe an automatic payment?
Liable in the sense of being used in this section of statute would be liable, one, for the payment, the actual wages. Two, there would be a civil penalty for a late payment. So in an instance in which an employer does not correct that and make them whole on that day, it would be a late payment with a civil penalty of up to $2,500.
Thank you. Representative Avalani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, when you say late payment for wages, that doesn't mean if they're on Friday, their mortgage comes out of that debit card and it bounces. Would the employer be liable for any fees incurred with that payment not going through, being returned, or anything like that?
I'm sorry, could you just, they wouldn't be liable for, they'd be liable for the wages, the sum total of the wages. If they're, I'm not, just explain the, apologies, Representative, just explain in terms of the.
So Friday, they can't access their money to transfer to their personal account, and their mortgage bounces that afternoon. The bank assesses a fee, the mortgage company assesses a fee. Would the employer be liable for those fees? If they came to you and said.
Because he can't pay his mortgage because he didn't get his pay.
Right.
So there's a $50 fine or 20, fee or something for late payments. Or if it was a direct deposit right from his debit card or his card to the bank and it bounces, so there's a fee plus a late fee, is that?
They could be liable for the fees relative to what the bank is charging them, but not if they owed the money to someone else and that other entity was then also charging them the fine, if that fee, if that makes sense.
Okay.
When we do a wage adjustment now, if the bank is fining you, we're fining you this amount of money because your account was overdrawn, we do attribute that to the employer. But if the person's not able to make their payment to their landlord, and then the landlord charges them a late fee, that would not necessarily carry through. But any of the fees directly charged through the account would be.
I see. I had recognized, I'm just checking eyes, everyone. Representative Schmidt.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. It was nice to hear from you. Thank you for responding to my email. I had sent everybody in the committee the latest issue that I saw with pay cards. Ask Hank had to go out and find out what happened to a woman's full account. She had found that every transaction that she made took a $3 fee. And so she decided to let it build up. Suddenly disappeared, and I know that they had to deal with the pay card company. They're not exactly sure what happened, and the restaurant that she was working for refused to discuss it with her. The money that she earns at a restaurant is her money, and if it isn't paid, if the pay card does something with it, the restaurant's still responsible to pay her, yes?
Correct.
Absolutely. I had thought that this issue was closed, but it looks like it's just getting moved aside. New pay cards being used, new fees on some of these things, overdraft fees that are happening to people because they're taking off a fee each time. How many issues do you see coming to you directly from employees on pay cards?
Thank you for the question, Representative. We do not see a lot of pay card issues come to us. Again, as I was speaking to Representative Seaworth's question, it does not come up that often, and when it comes up, it's principally in the realm of they were forced to use it. That's usually been the issue that has come up, at least in the years that I've been with the department. We have had instances, I know the case you're talking about, ultimately she did recover all the wages, but certain of the fees she was accruing were related to transfers she was trying to make, or as you're saying, one-time purchases, which again, there are fees depending upon how you want to use these cards, but it was not an instance in which she was not able to get her payment and not have a fee. You know, she could go on payday and pull her payment. That was not the problem. The problem was transfers and then also purchases. And as she was doing that, the fees were piling up, to your point.
Follow up?
Clearly, people who are having a problem with this don't understand the process really well. What happens when a pay card is instituted by a company? Do they have to explain everything that happens with that pay card to that employee so they can understand clearly when the fees are taken? Because all the fees are different depending on the pay card. I can imagine it can be very complex.
Present law does provide that they are supposed to receive a statement disclosing those fees, the nature of those fees, and the magnitude of those fees.
Follow up?
We know that some of the problems that are happening are with people who are unbanked, obviously. They may have a problem with language. They may have a problem with reading. Handing somebody a document that says you're going to be charged for this, they might not fully understand. Is there any way to assure that it is a full understanding of the employee when a pay card is used?
I don't know that there is a way. I think that would be very difficult in terms of putting into law. I think that it would be hard to say that you'd have to be, or we at that point considering capability, capacity, competency in terms of measuring those things. I understand exactly the concern you're identifying. I don't know. It's certainly not addressed in present law, and I don't know of a neat way to address it here.
I have a question for you. So if a situation occurred where there was a technical or processing deficit on a Friday, the person could not access their money. There is an issue with the pay card which no one can figure out at the present time. That individual, if this law passes, would have the ability to demand direct deposit, cash, or a check immediately.
Correct.
So we're not going to hear that at 2 o'clock, when everyone else gets paid another way and this individual cannot use their card, we're not going to hear the employer say at 4 o'clock, I'm not going to do that because if I pay you now and then the pay card kicks in for some reason over the weekend on Monday, you've been paid twice. I'm not going to pay you. You'll just have to wait 2 or 3 days. We're not going to have that situation, are we?
I believe, again, not to speak for the senator, but I believe that is part of the intent of this language. Is at present, that is one of the issues with the pay cards, is that a problem comes up and then the employer says, I've already dealt with this through the pay card company, so I am not dealing with it in the present. They wait for it to sort out, and sometimes it can take days, weeks to sort out, and the person's gone unpaid or late paid throughout that time.
So if an employer decides that they're going to use a pay card and there's a hiccup for no matter what reason, they'll be responsible first. They can deal with the pay card company later.
Correct. And one thing that I would also just want to point out is with a check, it works the same way. If presently an employer had a problem paying with checks, we would look at the employer to correct that, not say, well, the bank's going to fix it or the bank messed up my payroll account. We would look to the employer to fix that in the immediate. I think what we've experienced sometimes is, again, not in a lot of instances, but we have experienced issues with the pay cards where there has been that lag, and it has really been detrimental to the employees affected.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Deputy Commissioner? Representative Sullivan, and followed by Avalani.
Have there been instances where you have levied fines against companies that are in late payment status?
I believe so, yes. I can check to confirm that. But yes, if there was a late payment, there would have been fines. And late payment is one of the instances in which there's not a warning. So when that's come up, I'm certain there have been penalties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again, Deputy Commissioner. So under it says line 15, due to a technical or processing defect. So say they put in their wrong PIN number, and this is completely user error, and it doesn't reset for 24 hours, and they can't access their money till, say, Monday. Is the employer at fault?
It's possible in the given scenario that could fall under the language that's been put forth here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for taking my question. I'm concerned that this becomes a requirement for employment. That if you're unbanked for whatever reason, and you don't want a payroll card because maybe you're concerned about all the fees and what else could happen, you don't have a choice anymore. Would you believe?
Yes, you are correct in the sense of presently individuals can say that they want a check and they can be paid by a check. With the language put forth in the proposed legislation, an employer could say, I'm going to pay via direct deposit, and it would be in instances in which the person does not take direct deposit or cannot take direct deposit, the employer then could say, well, you're being paid via a pay card.
Well, so if the reason I can't take direct deposit is because the regular banks have such high minimum monthly balances that I can't afford to have $100, $200 in the account, and maybe I don't have a credit union near me that I could join where they don't have these outrageous fees and requirements. Can I take the debit card and get my sister or my neighbor to cash it for me? I probably can't do that like I could with a check.
The payroll cards are, as put forth here, they should be able to go to a financial institution convenient to the place of employment and do one feeless withdrawal.
And at banks where you don't have an account, they often charge you $7, $8, $10 to cash that check that is drawn on the bank. Would that be the case with this payroll card?
So under present law, employers are supposed to ensure that they have an arrangement with a bank so that even if individuals did not have an account, they would not be subject to a fee. And under this legislation, it's to extend that to pay cards that, again, individuals would be able to present them even if they don't have a particular relationship with a bank. That is the way that this is intended to work. If that's not happening or doesn't happen, that would be in violation of this language.
Okay. And if the bank that's designated is not convenient to the employee and the employee goes to another bank, there's a fee.
If the employee decides to go to an inconvenient location, that would not be a violation. The requirement is that there be a convenient location. There has to be a convenient location for the individual to do this. If they cannot do that because it doesn't exist, then the employer is in violation. If the individual decides to go someplace else and incurs a fee, that would not be in violation of this statute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Line 22 of the second page. Actually starts at line 20 if anybody wants to read it. Shall result in wage payments via payroll card. are we mandating payroll cards if there's only an electronic means, or should it be up to the employer to provide an alternative means? Or they should be locked into a payroll card?
There, you would not be locking employers would be able to say I'm paying via check, or they could say, in practice, I think how this would work is the employer could elect to say, I want to pay everyone via direct deposit. If there are individuals who cannot take it under direct deposit, they could mandate a payroll card. If the employer does not want to use a payroll card, they could then say, okay, I can't direct deposit this person, I'll give them a check. You wouldn't be necessarily forcing the employer to use the payroll card. You'd be forcing the employee to use the payroll card, but not the employer.
They're very good questions. Thank you, Chairman Infantine, Vice Chairman Seaworth, and committee members. My name is Pete Iceberg. I'm Vice President of Government Relations for ADP, which is the largest payroll company in the nation. We pay 1 out of every 6 U.S. workers. We think this bill will help both workers and employers. It'll help employers meet their wage and hour law obligations to pay workers on time. It can be impossible for employers to pay workers on time, in situations where there's physical delivery problems like bad weather, which is not unusual here, or the recent government shutdowns related to COVID. Electronic payments eliminate this concern. It was, really, again, impossible to deliver paper paychecks when the businesses themselves were shut down, the employees were at home. How do you get paper paychecks to the people who need it? They can't get to the bank. So if there's a snowstorm on payday, God forbid, no one is getting paid, and that's a problem. So this fixes that. Employers should be able to offer the choice of direct deposit or payroll cards. Electronic payments through direct deposit or payroll cards is an efficient, reliable, and cost-saving move for employers in New Hampshire, a major improvement over paper checks for employees. Again, most states already allow this. 29 states permit electronic wage payments, including Maine and Massachusetts. Employers that prefer to offer paper payroll checks would certainly be free to continue doing so. So, for example, if an employer had a collective bargaining agreement, they would probably just continue offering paper checks until the union, agreed otherwise. And people are used to this already. Most payments are already electronic. Virtually all government payments are electronic, such as tax refunds, unemployment insurance, Social Security, nutrition assistance, disability, and so on. Those are all electronic. 93% of American workers are already paid via direct deposit. So we're just talking about that last 7%. And government employees are generally all paid electronically. So this is something that's really only a problem in the private sector. Payroll cards have evolved to be much better for consumers than we've heard. We also saw negative accounts in the past. I think that's been addressed. This is a debit card like any other, so you can use it for spending at any retail establishment and get cash back. You can walk into any bank that has a Visa or MasterCard logo, walk up to the teller, ask them for the full amount. There's no fee for that. So very easy to transact. You'd really have to go out of your way to pay a fee to use this card. The only cost typically is to use an out-of-network ATM, and we make it pretty easy to find in-network ATMs through just on your phone app. Where's my free ATM? Very easy to find. There are free withdrawals at lots of major retailers. Walmart, 90% of the population live within, I think it's 5 miles of a Walmart. Walgreens, CVS, Target, Rite Aid, Circle K, Costco, all those major retailers, they have those all-point ATMs, and there's free transactions there. Cardholders can use payroll cards anywhere they would use a check, maybe with the exception that you couldn't just sign it over to somebody else, your spouse, your friend, something like that. So that's a problem. But it enables people to do free online bill payment. You know, this is a functional bank account. You do internet shopping you couldn't do otherwise if you're using, you know, paper checks. Very importantly, there are the Visa and MasterCard protections from fraud and dispute resolution. So that's a huge advantage for folks that are today are in the cash economy. They cannot be overdrafted. There are no NSF fees on these payroll cards. They often include free savings accounts and additional cards for family members. So it's a good choice for people with kids in college. Just want to give them a spending account with a certain amount each month. And frankly, paper checks are pretty bad choices for workers who have to present their check, you know, assuming they have a bank account, and wait for that check to clear. Those without bank accounts typically have to pay check cashing fees and then carry their full paycheck in cash, which is subject to loss or theft. There's also, most recently, earlier availability with electronic wage payments. Many banks now credit electronic payroll payments a day or two before payday. And electronic wage statements, the pay stubs, are generally also available before payday. So this is better for workers and for employers. We see it as a matter of when, not if. European workers, for example, haven't seen a paper paycheck in decades. I do want to respond to one question that came up, and that was related to the unbanked. This actually helps unbanked folks. They can't get a bank account today because they can't walk into the bank. Maybe they're undocumented. But if they can get a job, you have to have a Social Security number to get, you know, to be employed. But if you can get a job, the bank system relies on employers to do the know your customer authentication, verification. So they can get a job, they can get a payroll card. This is a functional bank account that they could not get before getting this job. So they can pay their bills electronically, all that good stuff. So it actually helps the undocumented. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I realize that ADP is a predominant handler of payroll, but you're not the only debit card in town. So could you speak to the possibility? I mean, I've heard about people having fees for balance inquiry. Is that something that doesn't happen with ADP cards?
Correct. Yeah, that doesn't happen. We basically the list of fees have gone down to pretty much zero. The only fee for ADP I can say is if you're using an out-of-network ATM. And again, we make it pretty easy to find an in-network ATM.
Follow up.
Follow up.
But again, you can only speak for ADP debit cards.
That's true. Yeah. So there are other cards. They have their own fee disclosure statements, and employers, you know, they may choose a card arrangement with adverse fees. You know, some other states have prohibited fee, you know, account balance inquiry fees and things like that. So those, you know, nuisance fees, if they're concerned. But usually that sorts itself out in the marketplace. Employers, you know, tend to use the best systems that are out there.
Another follow-up?
Another follow-up.
Thank you. And again, the employers are the one making the decision on which payroll card to offer, not necessarily consulting their employees or how this is going to work for them. And is the issue of the direct deposit, which I personally have, and my $100 a year shows up right on time. It's no worry. But isn't that something that's less problematic if a person can have that than the payroll cards? We don't hear about trouble with the deposit not getting there with your direct deposit, whereas payroll cards, we've heard a litany of other complaints about them.
I'm not sure I understood the question, but it sounds like there may be technical problems with delays in payments on payroll cards.
Yeah, payroll cards seem to be more problematic than direct deposit. If
Okay.
you're able to manage the direct deposit through perhaps one of those credit unions that isn't as greedy in their fees as a normal bank.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say direct payroll cards are really the functional equivalent of direct deposit in the sense of being, you know, problem-free. Like the same, they run on the same guardrails, the same systems as direct deposit. So the banking system is indistinguishable. It's the same. The problems come in with the confusion of employees of, you know, do I have my PIN? Where's my PIN? Where's my password? How do I use this card? Can I take it here? Can I take it there? I had a question from a bank teller that didn't know what they were doing when I went to ask them to, you know, cash the fee. We've actually, you know, for example, given letters to employees saying, you know, just take this to your teller. If they give you any difficulty, it directs them to contact, you know, corporate and let them, you know, confirm that there's no fee associated with this, that kind of thing. So there's some confusion about sometimes how do I use this card? And to the deputy commissioner's statement, it really we believe it is a responsibility of the employer if an employee does have difficulties, regardless of what the cause was, to help them through that.
One more.
Final follow-up.
Yes, final. This is my final question. So okay. So if you have the card, if you have the check, usually it comes with a pay stub, and you can keep track of your hours and your vacation time. Well, how do you do this with a debit card?
Sure. People who get payroll cards get the same pay stub as anybody that gets a check. They just get it electronically. And again, employers put this on a secure kiosk and they keep records forever. So it's actually better than, having something printed that you need to then keep track of, stuff in your pocket, forget where you put it, you don't know where it is. It's going to be on that secure internet portal forever, whenever you need it, back 10 years, whatever, something like that. But and it's fairly easy to do. Also, if an employee does want to print that, the employers typically have a secure printing area, like a kiosk, in the employer's office where the employee can just go and print their pay stubs if they just want a printed pay stub. But it's all very easy and secure, and this is how they interact with employers generally anyway, through these employee portals for their benefits and things like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It occurs to me that when I get my direct deposits, which I love, I have no problem with that, but some folks do. I can always check my bank account to see if the money that was supposed to go in actually did. If I get a pay stub and a payment card, how would I know how much money is actually on that card and if it matches the stub?
Sure, yeah. You would look at the pay stub as you would a payroll check. It has the net pay amount that was credited to your account, and obviously you can also typically use your phone to check your bank to see the amount.
But I don't have a bank.
Okay, it's just the payroll card itself.
Right.
It comes with an app that tracks your spending and tracks deposits and things like that. So it's right on your phone, so you can see the amount that's actually on the card itself at any time. Does that make sense? Sorry.
I guess. So basically, my app would know.
Follow up.
My app would be able to track exactly how much money is left on my payroll card.
Yes, right. So yeah, it'll show the deposit. It'll show any spending that your purchase at Starbucks. It'll give you a spending analysis over the past month and things like that. So it's actually pretty helpful for just financial management.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Clerk.
If a person doesn't have a phone, how would they get this information?
That person would probably use that, employer kiosk to print their paper pay stub, or if they don't have internet access at home or something like that. Typically, people have internet access at home and can look up their pay stub. But even if they don't have that, they can just use the kiosk at the employer shop to print their pay statement.
Further questions? Representative Avalani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Iceberg, for taking the questions. If a issue with ADP, say you've swept the money out of your employer's account, put it in yours, and there's a hiccup between your company and the payroll card, would the employer be liable for that under this?
If there's a problem between ADP, the payroll company, and the card company somehow resulting in no non-payment.
Correct, or late payment, or non-payment, or double payment, or anything that falls within this liable for late payment of wages.
Yes, the employer would be liable, and that's kind of the way the law works today. Again, as the Department of Labor mentioned, they really don't have authority over all the payroll companies, in the nation, so they wouldn't be able to directly enforce wage and hour laws against the payroll card companies or the payroll companies. But the employer is responsible, and the payroll card companies and the payroll companies themselves are liable to the employer under contract. So if there's a problem, the employer sorts it out, helps the employee, gets that solved, and then goes after the payroll company and says, what was the problem? You need to reimburse me for this.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Di Silvestro. Oh, no. Representative Cahill.
Actually, this question is for my colleagues who are on the committee who are employers. How many of you have employee kiosks?
Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Comes directly from my payroll company to myself, and they have access to it.
Any further questions for, yes, sir.
So, for example, for most of the time, when my payday comes up, I take my card and I go to the bank near my employer in Nashua, let's say, and everything works out fine. One week there's a snowstorm, and I live in either Windham, New Hampshire, or I live in Lowell, Massachusetts. How would could I take my card to a Lowell bank, and how would I do it? Would I take it to the cashier, or would I put it into the ATM machine to try to get my pay? And would I have to pay a fee? Am I being clear?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Basically just how this works, if you have the card, you're in maybe another state, or you're in, maybe there's a snowstorm, the pay is on your card today. So if you want to actually convert that to cash because you want to use cash for some reason, yes, you'd walk up to any bank teller of any bank that's a Visa affiliate or a MasterCard affiliate and just say, can you give me the full value on the card? And they give that to you in full in cash. Or you can go to any ATM and use that ATM to get cash. If it's an out-of-network ATM, there may be a fee for doing that. But again, we make it pretty easy to find ATMs where there's that are in network.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It just occurred to me that your company takes good care of its people, takes care of the people who are your customers, and I'm pleased to see that. But it's clear that there are some companies that aren't as high in regard. Do you think it's time to regulate the industry?
To regulate the payroll card industry? I guess it would be a question, if there have been, serious abuses that haven't been able to be resolved, then, perhaps, I guess I'm not sure I would be able to comment on that.
Well, you said that about 7% of people fall into the don't
Check.
receive, that 7% is likely to be the person who is new to the country, who doesn't speak the language, who is unbanked. They're the ones that really, really need extra help with this and could be taken for a ride. The person that I had referenced to everybody in an email, she was an intelligent person, worked full-time, went to college, took care of her kids, and she still fell into this trap. Didn't even know enough to come to the Labor Department for help. So it would seem to me that maybe there are disreputable companies out there that are giving your industry a very bad name, and perhaps it's time to regulate. But I did have another question. So you walk up to an ATM, an approved one, and this is not necessarily you, but it could be any of your cohorts. You ask for your check amount, and there's a small fee on it. So you take out 30% of it because you need some cash in hand. Now, when you withdraw some perhaps the next week, not on this same, are you drawing from the previous card, and would there be a charge on that? Or is every card new, or are you building an account? It's so unclear. Thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you for asking that. An employee is issued a single payroll card, so that's their payroll card. It represents the payroll card account, and that is functionally equivalent to a bank account. So the card doesn't change, just amounts keep getting added to it as over time the person works and so forth. And as they spend or, withdraw money from it, it just gets taken out as with a bank account. Does that help?
If I may.
Follow up.
But what if you don't take it all out this week?
Mhm.
And another pay period happens and
Yeah.
you take out some that next week?
Yep.
Are you charged a fee?
Oh, I think the law here guarantees that there is at least one free transaction per pay period to take out, the amount up to the full amount on the card. Beyond that, again, if you're using out-of-network ATMs, then there may be fees associated with subsequent withdrawals. Thank you.
Representative Warden.
Thank you. This bill would require that if an employee loses or destroys his or her payroll card, that the employer replace it within 24 hours. How does that work logistically? Do employers have a stack of these, or do they have to order it through you or through the bank to have it mailed to the employee as a replacement?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's a challenging issue, and we saw that was amended in after the Senate hearing, and it is a challenge. And essentially, yes, we do have to provide all clients, for example, with some cards ready to go, and those are instant issue cards. They don't have names imprinted on them. So if anybody does have a problem, they've got a card stock, and they can actually just put it into their reader, imprint it, communicate with the payroll company, and hand it to the employee. So logistically it works. And then, probably a week later, the person gets their imprinted card, replacement card.
Did I see a hand over here? No. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. and
Thank you
I
for the
will
opportunity.
Happily turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Are there any additional individuals? I don't know how many pink cards, but anyone else like to speak on this bill, on House Bill 209? Seeing none, thank you. We're closing the hearing on House Bill 209. I'm sorry, Brian, did you? Sure. Before we open the next hearing, Mr. Vice Chairman. Is this me privately or the whole committee?
You correct.
Okay, just a moment. All right, I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 345 regarding youth employment. And I would like to welcome the Green Valley School in Pembroke that is paying attention or listening on the web. So thank you very much. Pardon? The vice chairman's daughter is one of the students. So I wanted to know that. I call Senator Erin Hennessy to introduce her bill. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Erin Hennessy. I'm the state senator for District 1, which is the northern half of Grafton and all of Coos County. I am here to introduce SB 345, which is relative to youth employment. This came out of discussions that I had with, mostly they were small restaurants in the North Country during the height of the pandemic time when they got back into serving their clients but didn't have enough employees. And you would walk in someplace and there'd be a 14-year-old hostess there, and he or she wouldn't be able to seat you because the tables weren't cleared. And in our current law, that 14-year-old can't clear away empty beer glasses because of the way our laws are written. So this first section of this bill deals with clearing up what is kind of our probably old and outdated. And in my discussions with various different departments, I don't even think they were aware of this language in the RSAs. So it says that if you're 14 and you're able to work, you can clear glasses from a table. So it just helps out a lot of our restaurants that are looking for workers and allows responsibilities to expand. The second section deals with 16 and 17-year-old workers only, and it clears up a lot of confusion that I have heard from a lot of different employers other than restaurant owners as well. And it tries to just clarify how many hours a student or a 16 and 17-year-old can work during the week, and doesn't put limitations on if there's 4 days of school that week or 3 days of school that week. And then finally, the third section also clears up what I found out to be the most confusing section of our labor laws right now. And if you look at the way RSA 276A13 right now related to night work, it says no youth who works more than 2 nights a week past 8 p.m. or before 6 a.m. shall be permitted to work more than 8 hours in any shift during the particular week. That's a very confusing law for not only students to keep track of their hours, but employees. So the way Section 3 is written right now helps to clarify that. And I'd be happy to take questions and also recognize that there's people behind me that will answer them as well.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my colleagues that have been with me on this committee a while won't be surprised I'm going right to the night work. So the existing night work law, as obscure as it can be, if I were to boil it down, I would say it's a limitation on overtime in certain circumstances. The new version of that law is a hard limit preventing anyone who's 17 from working past 10 p.m. To me, that's a big change. It's a big restriction. And I wonder what is behind driving, basically a sledgehammer. It's a big restriction on youth workers, and I'm wondering what the problem that's being addressed in that, besides simply the confusion with the current law.
My understanding is that it's a lot of the confusion. People often read the law to that no one could work past 8 o'clock at night, even though it doesn't say that. Additionally, if you work past 8 o'clock on Friday or Saturday night, you can't work 8 hours, more than 8 hours in a shift. So Friday and Saturday night are not school nights, and kids should be able to work longer shifts if they were like on weekends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Babalani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The line 4, when they're changing it from 15 to 14 years of age to clean tables, remove empty containers and glasses, if they're cleaning glasses that have residual liquor in them, has the Liquor Commission given a look at this to make sure that they're not in possession of alcohol, minor in possession of alcohol during their work?
Yes, and I apologize if they're not here today. They did submit a letter in support, and I'll make sure that you get that. Yes, so they have taken a look at it, and they support this change.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up.
The line 10 and 11, again, with Representative Seaworth, we worked quite a bit on this a few years ago. If a 16 or 17-year-old is in a work study program, goes to school 1 week, maybe goes to their work study or something the following week, are they still only mandated for 35 hours to work that week when they could be working 40?
I think it would depend on how you read this. If school is not in session for them because they're working that week, but I would refer that question to somebody else who would have the technical knowledge to answer that. I apologize.
Okay, and follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up.
The night work. Let's say a student wants to work on, wants to be a lineman for Eversource and has to work overnight on certain jobs or is on work release or work study, and there's a job that is overnight on a Friday night because he's not in school, has no waking up, and wants to do that, this would effectively tell them they can't do that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, it would limit their work on a Friday night to 12 a.m. And this was not in the original bill. The Senate committee amended it to say this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Addison, followed by Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. If a student gets out of work at 3 p.m. and they drive to their work, which in a rural area like Grafton and Coos County can be upwards of 30 minutes or an hour away, they start their shift at 4 o'clock, but they get out at 10 p.m. on a school night. They're getting home at about 10:30, 10:45. They still have to get ready for bed. Our own Southern New Hampshire University suggests that a teenager gets 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night to be functional in school. So if they meet that, they're sleeping from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and immediately have to get up and get ready for school at 8. At what point during that interval was the child supposed to do the 2 hours of homework that they got assigned that day in school?
Thank you for the question. I would just say that not all of our students are alike and not all of their family situations are alike. And some of our kids do 16, and this is 16 and 17-year-olds only, do have to go to work for many different reasons. And I would also point out that a lot of our students do co-curricular activities, like my daughter's in drama, and she doesn't get home until 10 o'clock at night and has to figure out how to do her homework as well.
Follow up. When I listened to this bill's introduction in the Senate Commerce Committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like you referenced the labor shortage as one of the motivators for the introduction of the bill. And in discussions with this, I've heard, well, a student doesn't have to work those 35 hours. They can just work up to that. Like you said, a lot of circumstances are different. But if employers see this nice new cap for them to get more hours out of, and they schedule those kids for that, do you see those kids feeling pressure to work those hours to keep that job instead of voicing their concerns and saying, I need to pump the brakes on this because I'm failing my classes because I can't do my homework?
Thank you again for the question. So the current cap is 40 and a half hours. So it's actually a higher cap. So it would be a lower cap than we have in current law.
No follow-up.
All set. Representative Cahill.
Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for taking my question. I'm looking at lines 9 and 10. And any employer's predetermined designated work week during which school is in session for 5 days. What happens if it's only in school for 4 days, if there's a holiday? All bets are off?
Thank you for the question. No, that was what this portion of the bill tried to clarify because there was a lot of confusion for student workers and for employers about the current language and 4 days of work, 4 days of school or 5 days of school and how many hours they may work. So this attempted to clear that up.
Follow up.
I appreciate I appreciate that there certainly is confusion, but this leaves it sort of vague in that it's like the law doesn't apply if they're not in school for 5 days. So I'm not sure we've answered the question.
Yes, thank you for thank you for that question. That is for summertime or breaks when school is not in session. Then this would not apply.
I see. Thank you.
And I apologize, Mr. Chair, I misstated. Our current cap is 48 hours and not 41 and a half hours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. With reference to the night work section, do I understand this correctly that during summertime, where this section would still apply, no youth would be able to work later than 10 o'clock on a Sunday through Thursday, notwithstanding that it's summer?
That is an excellent question, and I'd have to look at the 276A 12 or whatever is above it just to confirm that, but I will get you that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. if I'm reading this right, right now, under current law, minors, 15-year-olds would not be allowed to work in lounge areas. But if this goes through, they would be allowed to work in lounge areas and not necessarily to pick up glasses. It just frees them up to work in lounge areas.
Thank you for the question. It allows 14 and 15-year-olds to clean tables, remove empty containers and glasses, and assist in stocking
Yeah.
in those areas.
But you're doing away with the section that says 15-year-olds may be employed in dining areas and minors not less than 16 would be allowed to be employed in lounge areas. Would this open up 15-year-olders to be able to work not only to pick up glasses, but to do other work in a lounge area?
Thank you for the question. So a lot of establishments have a dining area and a lounge area. And if they have both, then 14 and 15-year-olds would be able in those areas to clean tables, remove empty containers and glasses, and assist in stocking. I hope that answers your question. I don't know what other activities you think they would be able to do in a lounge area.
Follow up? What other areas that 15-year-olds were not allowed to do in lounge areas before? It had to be 16-year-olds. That wipes that out.
It just pertains to what is written there. It's minors not less than 14 years of age may be employed to clean tables, remove empty containers and glasses, and assist in stocking.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't understand your question.
Are you trying to find out whether or not they'd be able to serve alcohol or not? Is that where your question is going?
Well, 16-year-olders were not allowed to deal with alcohol, but they were allowed to do something that 15-year-olders weren't allowed to do under current law. That's the way I read it. Has there been a change for 15-year-olds?
Senator, you're welcome to answer if you can, or not.
So this doesn't open up 16-year-olds to do anything else that they weren't allowed to do before, and it doesn't open up anything that 14 and 15-year-olds weren't allowed to do before other than to clean tables, remove empty containers and glasses, and assist in stocking.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Avalani, followed by Adjunct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, it was 16-year-olds may be employed in lounge areas. They're lowering that to 14 years old and taking out the ability to make sure that they're not allowed to serve. And that's why I asked the question earlier, to make sure that the 14-year-olds would be able to be in possession of glasses that have residual liquor in them and things like that when they were cleaning those tables.
Thank you for the question. Yes, they would be able to clear empty glassware or residual beverages.
And
Yes.
be allowed in lounge areas.
Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Adjunct, followed by Prout.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the main crux of the bill is to eliminate some of the confusing language and allow for minors to clear glasses off the tables, would there be resistance to the forthcoming amendment that would move the maximum hours that a student is allowed to work when school is in session 5 days a week to 24 hours, and set the maximum amount of time, or the maximum hour that they're able to work on a school night to 8 p.m. to better ensure that that child is able to get more sleep, do their chores, do their homework, and be better prepared for school the following day?
Thank you for the question. I think there would be resistance. I don't think every kid, even though school may be in session 5 days a week, has the same school calendar. Some of our students have half days of school and go to work full time, or 35 hours a week, or what have you. So I think every individual, for 16 and 17-year-old, their situation is different. And like I said, we don't restrict the amount of hours on our kids that do co-curricular activities. And so if they're not doing those and they're choosing to work instead, I don't think a lower amount of hours is relevant.
Follow up?
Follow up.
I understand your point about co-curricular activities. Are you aware of co-curricular activities that take up to 35 hours a week while school is in session?
Yes, especially if you're on more than one team and a band or a math team.
Representative Pro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. Regarding the night work section, comparing it to what it replaced said that it applies until 6 a.m. And the new language doesn't have that. So it's unclear to me whether someone would have to clock out at midnight and can clock back in at 12:15, or if they have to wait till dawn, or what the intent is there.
Yes. No, I don't know.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. So apparently this is still confusing.
Maybe Representative Commissioner Ogden can handle that. Representative Abalani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Again, so back to night work on line 21, what if there's a holiday on Monday? They wouldn't be able to work Sunday night into Monday to midnight. Like Memorial Day weekends, very heavy up north, July 4th weekends, Labor Day weekends, Columbus Day weekends. They would be limited on that Sunday, even though they have no school on Monday.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, no other questions, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll get you the letter from the Liquor Commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Ogden, the Department of Labor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Infantine. Just in terms of, to be clear, the Department of Labor can't speak to the first portion, as was referenced by the senator. That would be the Liquor Commission who would or should or could speak to that. In terms of Section 2, the two things we just wanted to point out was, in addition to raising the cap of 30 hours to 35, it's also eliminating the more than 6 consecutive days. And I just want to be clear on that because we had not seen or spoken to this amendment. This amendment was made after the public hearing at Senate. So we just want to be very clear that in addition to raising the cap during a week from 30 to 35 hours, it's also raising the idea that individuals could work 7 days consecutively, or these youth could work 7 days consecutively. Responsive to some of the concerns that Representative Adjutant had brought up, the most calls that we get on youth labor for night work is the idea that people don't believe that their children should be working past a certain hour. That's always been a problem, in my opinion, humble opinion, relative to the existing law. As the existing law of night work, it does set inside this limitation that if an individual youth was to work past 8 o'clock, there would then be ramifications that the employer would have to keep track of. And I do think, to the senator's point, that has led some employers in practice to just say, I'm not going to have a kid work past 8. But to be clear, present law would allow a kid to work entirely through the night. And that has been the bulk of the calls that we get on night work, is parents calling us and saying, my kid's working at 11 o'clock. That's not allowed, right? And it is allowed. So I just want to be clear that's really the calls that we get on night work. I can't speak to, I had heard about the sledgehammer or hard. I can't speak to how restrictive this would be to certain employers. I don't know how they do their staffing. But I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have questions relative to the legislation.
Representative Abalani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, section 8, 9, 10, and 11 from the 30 to 35 hours in the 6 consecutive days. If the student is enrolled in a work-study program, they go to school 1 week and they're on their job the next week. Do you see a problem with this being changed for that? Working six consecutive days or 40 hours per week.
How we would presently apply that is we presently apply it if school is in session or if there's a vacation week. That's where we wouldn't look at the internship or externship type of environment as not being in school, so therefore the hours are elevated. So, I mean, if that's something that the committee wants to consider, they certainly could. But presently, we would look at the situation you're talking about is that if it's not a vacation week, the kid is in school. So the hour limitations would apply. Representative Cahill, and I apologize, that reminds me of the question that Representative Cahill brought up. I do think that that is something to consider, that as presently drafted, where it says school is in session for 5 days, if school was not in session for 5 days, you would not have the 35-hour cap. You would instead default to the cap, which says 48 hours, and that's in 276A11, which says, notwithstanding any of the provisions in A4, you have a hard cap at 48 hours. So we would look at A4 and we would say, okay, school was in session, school was not in session for 5 days, therefore the 35 hours doesn't apply. And then you would default to 276A11, which would be the 48 hours. The only other thing, I apologize, that I would offer is that in terms of I can echo the senator's sentiments that individual employers have contacted us and saying the sliding scale that was introduced in 2018 was difficult to work with. The sliding scale being that if school was in session for 4 days, they could do 40 and a quarter. If it was 3 or less, they could do 48. Employers typically told us they did not leverage the flexibility provided by that because it was difficult for them to account for how many days was the kid in school on a given work week or pay period.
You got to finish up with Representative Avaloni. Follow up? Okay. Representative Seaworth?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my first question was related to that section we were just discussing on line 11. To me, this language about the 6 consecutive days limit, which is being repealed, isn't that redundant with the day of rest legislation, which applies universally, not just to teens? In other words, if an employer was trying to employ a teenager during the school year for 7 days in a week, doesn't that fall under the day of rest section of our RSAs?
Yes, I do. I see your point. I do think that that could present as a prohibition on that type of staffing.
Thank you. And my follow-up, which is not quite related, going to the night work, you mentioned that most of the problems had to deal with confusion. People thinking maybe the law prohibited things that it doesn't, or the other way, the employer not understanding what the prohibition means to them. Are there situations, and how common are they, where the law as presumably intended is the issue? That, in other words, employers who are pushing the limit with after hours and overtime, that the real issue is too long shifts running too late at night? Or would you say that almost entirely the issue is confusion with the law and people wondering why it hasn't put a limit on the hours?
I think it's the latter. I think that when we talk about night work or we try and explain why there could or should be something such as night work, I think the real concern is what Representative Adjutant brought up, this idea that people or kids in school should be having enough rest to be able to show up to school the next day and perform. And I think the existing law has been confusing to that because, again, you could have kids work all night every night so long as they're not working shifts longer than 8 hours. So that's always been something that I think rang as a little confusing to folks because they were saying, how is this preventing the problem? And again, I think in a general sense, the problem being people think that youth should be going home, going to bed, and being able to wake up to go to school the next day.
Follow up?
Thank you.
We got to move this along, gentlemen.
Yes, so I want to echo, it was an earlier question. To your understanding, though, the night work section is not related to school being in session. It's a general prohibition based on age, so it applies equally during the summer as it would during the school year.
Correct.
Am I correct? Yes, thank you.
And just the last thing I would say is I am going to confirm, I'm going to look at that day of rest issue, and I'll respond to the committee. I just want to make sure I'm not misstating that. I will look at the day of rest, whether that serves the same purpose as the 6 consecutive days.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Striking out sections B and C, how would that affect homeschoolers?
Homeschoolers, in terms of our application of the law to homeschoolers, has been that if the district in which they reside is in session, we consider them to be in session.
Okay. Any additional questions, Representative Cahill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ogden. I agree that it's been very confusing, and we haven't helped matters much with our most recent effort. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the confusion was made worse in our last effort, and this doesn't help a lot either. I think there should be a bright line at perhaps 9 o'clock on school nights instead of 10. And would it be possible, would it be sensible to say that this that's also applied during the school year? So if somebody has a holiday, they could do a little bit more work around the house or get ready for that SAT, whatever they're just have it during the school year. You can't work past 9 o'clock on a weeknight, or I'm fine with midnight on well, if you don't have school, but during the school year, which is September or August through June, would that be easier to understand? Because I think many of your incidents you find out after the fact that the violation has occurred.
I understand your point, Representative. I do think that that is a policy decision in terms of if you think it should be specifically stated towards school. I do think that that comes up and that the employers are looking for flexibility on those summer vacations, on those weeks in which there's vacation. So I think it's a sensible thing to work on and look to, but it's ultimately a policy decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up with Representative Cahill, if we make it for the school year, sometimes juniors and seniors do get out a little earlier than the rest of the segment. Would they be held to that school year, even though they are technically out of school?
I think we would still look, are they duly enrolled in terms of if they've not graduated yet or separated yet? I don't know. I'll be honest in saying I don't know how we've dealt with that issue even currently in terms of looking at that summer slide type of scenario. I don't know how we've dealt with that, but I think we're looking, are they duly enrolled in school, and is school in session in the particular district?
Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned the getting calls from parents at, say, like, my child is working until 11 p.m. Is this legal? Is this allowed? Is there ever any follow-up to those discussions where the parent says something like, I don't want my child to lose their job if they complain to the manager that they're not getting their homework done or they're incapable of meeting other responsibilities? Because that's one of the pressure points that I see on this is students feeling like they don't want to lose that job and don't want to upset things at home, but also, and as a consequence of that, not telling the employer I can't work until 10 p.m. at night because I'm failing my classes.
Thank you for the I think it's a great question because it's actually a large part of the dialogue in those contexts is because you'd think you'd say to the parent, well, don't let them work, but the parents will often say to us, well, if I tell my kid they can't do it, they'll just replace them with someone who can do it. So it's kind of, that's the concern. So you're spot on that is the issue, is that parents are seeing it as if they set the barrier, their kid might lose their job or those hours, so that is the concern.
And thank you. And in an instance where maybe you have a parent who says, well, my child can handle that. They can toughen up or they can figure out how to do their homework. Maybe they can do it in study hall. That's one that I have personal experience with. is that then putting that 16-year-old in the position of having to go to the employer where there's that power imbalance and say, I need to be let out earlier than everybody else at night, which may make that student uncomfortable or pressure them to not, in fact, ask the employer that.
I could see that as being possible.
So no further questions. Thank you very much. I have one of these buttons up here where I can turn everybody off if someone gets out of hand. That's what I did accidentally, Mike. The next card, Mike Sillen from Aroma Joe's. Sorry, Mr. Summers, you got to wait one more turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for accepting and receiving me here today. My name is Mike Sillen. I represent Aroma Joe's Coffee. It was started 22 years ago. Our first store was in East Rochester, New Hampshire. We've grown to 83 stores across 6 states. 34 of those 83 are in New Hampshire, and we're quite proud of that. It was a business started by my brother and myself and my 2 cousins. 4 of us. The majority of our staff, and if any of you are customers, probably know they're all high school and college kids. This is their first job. We have a high turnover rate, but we're proud of that. These are kids that come to us and they've never answered a phone, not knowing who was not on the other side of it. They do not know how to clean a toilet. They don't know how to sweep or mop a floor. This isn't everyone that I'm talking about. I'm giving you real examples, though. 5 to 10% of these kids don't know how to wash dishes with hot water. And I want to make sure that the committee understands that we value them. We value their education. I come from a family of educators. My 2 daughters worked for my company. My youngest one still does. And I'm quite proud of the life skills that she's learned. She knows what a GFCI outlet is. She knows how to fix it when it's tripped. She knows how to turn the water off if the sink is leaking. These are real solid life skills. They know how to count change back. You ask a kid today that, hasn't worked in this kind of industry, they may not know how to make change. So I think it's important to remember that I'm here today not representing not supporting this bill for what it can do for me as an employer. I'm here to explain what an employer like myself means to the state of New Hampshire. In the 22 years that we've been operating in this state, we must have employed tens of thousands of young kids that we send out into the world with these life skills. And from some of the things that I've heard today, absolutely, we don't require, we're not pressuring these kids to work into the night or longer hours. We are trying to make it available to them if they so choose to make that decision with their educators, with their teachers, their principals, their families. We're trying to let the choice be theirs, but the way that the law currently is written, very confusing, very limiting. And I'll give an example, and because I've heard, extracurricular activities and what do those hours mean? We had a young gentleman, didn't want me to use his name here today, but he was in a band, a real instrumental band. He was a guitar player. He was a great student, but pulled good grades, was 16 years old, had his parents' permission, but he wanted to work because he had to put himself through school. He was going to be the one responsible to earn his way through college. He had his own car payment. He had his own gas to put in, and he certainly made a little bit of money playing with this band, but not a lot. And he with the law currently written, I couldn't give him the hours without going into violation. I couldn't let him work the hours that he wanted to work without going into violation. And he ended up just getting another job. So in the instance where we're concerned about me, leveraging or threatening someone to lose their job because they can't fulfill, it's the absolute opposite. I'm here today to answer any questions that I can about my business and how this law affects what I do. But I think it's real important that you guys, that everyone here understands that for Aroma Joe's at least, this is a real opportunity to continue doing what we're doing for these kids. And since that night work sliding scale, very, very confusing, and honestly, it's not worth trying to track the difficulty that is the way that it's the way it's currently written.
Thank you. Representative Adjtant, followed by Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking the question. What would be the drop-off in picked up skills that one of your student employees could pick up in 24 hours a week versus 35 hours a week? Is there a measurable difference there?
Yep. Thank you for your question. No, there's not a measurable difference, but I can give you an example of, out of the 300 employees that I currently have control over in the state, that's only 13 of those 34 stores are mine. So there's going to be over 1,000 instances where I can't quantify that for you. But I can tell you the 300 employees that I have, the average 16 or 17-year-old hours worked for me is 16 hours a week. I'm not going to get anywhere near the 35-hour cap. But there are going to be some instances, like the band member that I just gave you, where he went and worked somewhere else, kept a job. He left me completely, then he just chose to work 2 part-time jobs somewhere else. And I'm saying, well, he wanted to stay with us. I wanted to employ him, but I couldn't. So he just chose to left and then work 2 part-time jobs somewhere else.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you. To paraphrase an earlier conversation during a different hearing, would you believe that there are employers in the state of New Hampshire who are not as considerate as far as staying away from the cap and making sure that their employees don't feel that kind of pressure that a place like Aroma Joe's would be?
Sure, I believe that that's possible. I don't know of any, and nor would I want to take a stab at a guess at any, but certainly I believe that's possible. I believe that that's probably more possible with companies that have 8-hour shifts. We don't do that. Specific to the labor pool that we have, and we're lucky. I get a whole flood of new people every year. But the back end of that, the unlucky part of that, is they leave a year and a half, 2.5 years after they start. So for me, you know, I don't have specific, you know, information that I can answer that says, yeah, those people do it, but we don't. I don't know that. But for us, our longest shifts are 4 hours. And that's why I don't approach that 35-hour cap. I support the 35-hour cap because there are instances where that would have helped me retain an individual that wanted to stay working for me, but I couldn't without going into violation.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you for taking my question. You mentioned the band member and the fact that you would have been in violation if you had done what he wanted to do. Could you be specific exactly what the violation would have been and exactly what he wanted you to do?
Yep, sure. So he was under 18 and he wanted to work later at night. We close at 9 p.m. So I couldn't employ him past 8 p.m. So, and he wanted more than the allowable hours during that sliding scale week. So if school was in session for 5 days a week, he was only allowed to work those hours into the night. But I didn't want to deal with any of that because of the confusion and because of tracking this one individual would have just taken more resources than what it would have been worth. But I felt bad for him because I didn't want to keep track of how difficult it would be currently to keep track of.
Follow up.
So what exactly would be the violation that you would have?
He would have sorry. Yeah, thank you for your question. I would have wanted him to work more than 8 hours following a night that he would have worked past 8 p.m. and all that work for one individual. I just don't have the resources for that.
Vice Chairman Seaworth?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on that one, and I think I understand the concern with the current night work, but as a substitute where there would be proposed a hard limit on start time, a hard limit on end time, would that be a viable solution to you if those times did not match your business hours? Either they couldn't start when your store opened, or they couldn't work past the time when your store closed.
Sure. Thank you for your question. Right now, the way that the bill has been introduced, it does fit with what with what works for me. So I guess I would need a scenario to answer specifically.
And if I may follow up, I apologize, I'm kind of asking you to project to employers who aren't here. For example, a farmer who might employ someone pretty early in the morning, or I don't know what time McDonald's closes. I haven't been to one in a while.
24 hours some places.
Sure.
A place that's open till 11 or open till midnight, where it would clearly fall outside of this. My question is, unless your business happens to fit the model in the bill, isn't the cure worse than the problem if you find yourself in a situation where you're unable to employ people in your business hours because of the change in law?
Sure. So thank you for the follow-up, and I'll try the best I can to answer that the way that I understand that you've asked it.
Thank you.
So for me, in my experience with just what I do, I would say that a farmer would love this. An individual that happens to not have to go to school, because we all understand school is much different than when we were all there. You had to be there at 7:30, you left at 2:30, done. That was easy for then. That is not the way it is now, right? So for me, if a farmer could have an individual that doesn't have to be in school for that one particular day, let's just say that this individual student has enough credits, or they have a work release day that day, I would think that the farmer would love it that that person could show up at 3 a.m. and work an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift and not be restricted. Now, that may not work for a restaurant that is open to 11 p.m. Hey, honestly, I don't like the 10 p.m. cutoff date. I think it should be later. But in the spirit of what the other committee member said, I do believe that kids should get rest and should be prepared for the next day. The issue that I have currently is they're leaving at 8 p.m., but they're not going home to study and do homework. They're driving to their friend's house and playing video games, and I'm not trying to fix the state of our youth. I'm trying to employ the ones that want more hours and that want to do this job. And I truly believe that companies like mine are doing right by the state by teaching these kids these life skills.
Right. Representative Greg Hoff, sorry.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Huff.
Chairman. I just want to take a quick second. I apologize to the chair. This is not a question. I just want to say thank you.
Very well. Any additional questions, Representative Avalani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony today and taking our questions. It's been said that parents have complained to DOL that their child's working longer than they should be. Have you had interactions with parents where they come into you and say, hey, can you give them less hours, or if this job is interfering, can you adjust their hours or anything like that? Have you had that type of interaction when there's been a problem because they're working not too many hours, but because they're working an extra job outside of their regular curriculum?
Sure. Yep. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Yeah, we have, and we deal with that like we deal with any situation, with any interaction with a parent, customer, vendor, or an employee. That absolutely, we ask, what's the problem? What's going on? Their grades are slipping. Absolutely, no problem. We are a completely open and very transparent company with our employees. We tend to not try to deal with the parents too much because we don't employ the parents. But if there's a real issue, I would hope that they would feel comfortable reaching out to me before calling the New Hampshire Department of Labor. But if they did and it became an issue, absolutely, it's not more important to me that I have a 16-year-old kid working from 7 to 9. It's more important that that kid's got a good home life and and they've got good grades and they're generally happy in their life. This isn't about me just covering a 2-hour shift. I truly believe if more people did what we did and cared for these kids, that is ultimately what's better for me as a business. If I have happy, productive employees, then I'm going to have a very successful business. So I'm not trying to create an environment where I'm forcing kids to work. I just want to create an environment where if they want to, and in some cases they need their parents' permission, then absolutely I would like them to work for me because I think we're doing great things for them. And I'm speaking for my employees. They want more hours than I can currently give them.
Susie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be would you believe, because I agree with everything you say, because I personally have a daughter that actually works for your company here in Concord. And they've been very supportive. Academically, she's fantastic. Sports-wise, she's a great athlete. But when she asks for time off or when she asks for time to work, that company that you own has been very supportive, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing
I actually do believe that, and thank you. I mean, I would hope we were doing something right all this time. So,
seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate that. Last card I have, Mike Summers, New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Summers. I'm the president and CEO of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. We're here in support of SB 345. I think you've kind of hashed this to death. I don't know that I have much to add to that. So a couple things I will add is, there was some discussion in the Senate hearing around night work, and obviously night work has been hugely problematic for our industry. It's confusing. Many people were in violation of it simply because, if a student worked to 8:30 on Tuesday and Wednesday and then tried to put in a 9 or a 10-hour shift on Saturday or Sunday or Friday night, they were automatically in violation. It was extremely confusing, and as the previous speaker said, most businesses just stayed away from it because they didn't understand it, didn't know how to manage it, and frankly, it wasn't worth the time and effort. So, I think originally when Senator Hennessy filed this bill, she actually just struck the whole night work section, which was what we had testified in support of and preferred. But I think that there was also some discussion in that committee hearing, much like you're having here, about, what should some times be. And I will concur with the statement made earlier that, 10 p.m. Outside of the school year for, middle of the summer for a student on a Saturday night is problematic for our industry. I'll be perfectly honest with you. So hopefully, ultimately we'd love to see it struck. But if that can't be the case, and obviously we'd like the bright line to be as late as it can be, because again, our industry flexibility is going to be key for most of our businesses. I don't know that I need to really speak to lounge, but I guess I'll end with that. The one thing I will say is I guess the existing lines 12 through 17, again, change made in 2018, hugely confusing for businesses. No businesses took advantage of this to my knowledge, and frankly, it ended up being more of a headache than anything else. So we're actually happy to see that go away and try to come to some other kind of an arrangement. So with that, I will end, and I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions.
Mr. Summers, I believe in the Senate, unless I'm totally missed something here, Senator Soucy wanted the 10 o'clock. And that was a compromise that was made. Is that
I believe
accurate?
that is the case, yes, but I also don't want to speak for Senator Soucy, but I believe that was the case.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Summers? Representative Mandeville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking you to speak for your organization if you feel comfortable doing that. If the night work section, instead of what it said, provided that no person of the age governed could work past say either 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. on a night before school was in session and said nothing else, would your organization be able to support that?
As with all legislative language, I'd love to see that in writing first. But I think that, again, with the language you see there on lines 2021, I think that was just an accommodation to try to get to some kind of a compromise, I guess. I don't know that I could say definitively that we would support that. I would want to see it in writing, but ultimately, I think that there is some recognition from industry and from business owners that yes, we don't necessarily want our kids working till 1 a.m. every school night either. So, one thing I will add is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's a workforce shortage right now, and pretty much our workers are setting the standards. So when somebody asks us for time off or they can't work past an hour, businesses are accommodating it. They're falling all over themselves to accommodate it, because if we don't, there are 4 other businesses within the same city block that will be happy to accommodate that. So it is very much a workers' environment right now, and we couldn't be more accommodating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Summers. The 12 o'clock on Friday and Saturday night, given pouring establishments typically stay open later than that, would you like to see that struck? And to Representative Mandeville's and just have till 8 p.m. as long as there is a previous next day of school. That would eliminate the holiday issues that we spoke about earlier and vacation weeks.
Well, and I think part of the clunky part of night work was this whole days when school is in session is the way it's currently drafted. And the real issue with that is Sunday was not considered a school day, even though they had school, first thing Monday morning. But they couldn't work later on Fridays because it was a school day. So the existing structure didn't really work either. But to your question, yeah, I frankly, we would love to see night work just go away. It has been nothing but a headache for industry. But if we were to do something, again, I think we should focus it around when school is in session, because I think there's a recognition there. I don't know about 8 or 9 o'clock, and again, I will go back to my earlier statement. I want to see it in writing before I make any commitments.
All right. Seeing no other hands, thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr. Summers. I don't have any other pink cards. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing none, I'm closing the hearing on Senate Bill 345. It's just a natural reaction. I turn to the right, I guess. I have a question of the committee. We have the situation with Senate Bill 276 that we heard first thing this morning. We have a bill in front of us that's relatively simple, and we have an amendment. This was thrown at me this week, just like, you guys, and I sent it to you last night. That was the first I had received the official amendment that I sent it on. We have 2 situations here. We can wait till next Wednesday if we want to exec this. If we exec it today, we will and pass it on to finance. We are technically within, it has to be out of committee today. If not, I don't know what the speaker is going to do about suspending rules, because bills have to go to second committee, have to be done today. So I'm between a rock and a hard place here, because I have a lot of members not here, and I don't know how people are going to vote. The chairman personally thinks that our lane has to do with the original bill. The finance part isn't in our lane, and I'd rather chuck it over to the people that do. But because I don't know, I haven't had a caucus, I don't know who's going to do anything, I don't want to cut my nose off to spite my face here and have this thing die. So, is there a big group of people that wants this thing to die? Could let me know now, so I wait until next Wednesday to exec this?
Mr. Chairman, you talking about the amendment or the underlying bill?
The amendment. The underlying bill, I don't think anyone has a problem with, correct? So it's underlying bill. So
Yeah, personally, I'm not going to support the amendment, the $1 million spend.
Yes. Yeah, it would be a committee amendment. Yeah, anyone could adopt that amendment. Representative Prout.
Just question of the chairman. Is the deadline tomorrow at noon for two committee bills? Or today for two committee bills? Then
Representative,
Per the calendar, today is the last date to report out bills that would go to a second committee.
and that's usually at noon. So I think we've already missed
Yeah, I don't know what reporting out means.
Well, my understanding is that means we've already missed the deadline, and the House Clerk is directed to put it on the calendar as no recommendation. Or am I wrong on that?
No. The,
I don't know the answer.
if I
but
may,
Yes.
and I'm going by the testimony of, which might have been before you came in, the testimony of some of the presenters on this bill. The statement was made that the speaker has been made aware, that the chair of finance has been made aware of what we're doing. So they are ready if we should get the, even though we've missed the deadline, and I actually talked to Heather too about this, so that everyone knows what we're thinking of doing, and that even though we've missed noon already, they should be ready for our action should we decide to take it.
Brian?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm going to open an executive session on 276 at my own peril. Is there a motion on the floor on the amendment on the House Bill 276? Representative Seaworth.
I'd like to make a motion that OTP with the amendment. Yes, so I'll move the amendment.
We're going to move amendment 2022-1489S.
Could you repeat that?
Yes, that
Slower.
would be 2022-1489S. Okay, it's been moved by Brian Seaworth, seconded by Representative Sullivan. You're recognized to speak to your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'll echo what both you have said, Mr. Chairman, and what my namesake across the aisle has said. This amendment is something that really needs to go to finance, and you know, I, like some of my colleagues, I have my own opinion on this, but I think we'd be doing a disservice if we try to handle a finance issue here in Labor Committee and so prevent this bill from moving forward. So in that vein, I've made the motion to pass the amendment, whatever I feel about it, as a means to get this to the correct committee within the deadline. I'll also comment, it may be a little off the amendment. Likewise, I think the underlying bill probably should have gone to Ways and Means because that's who's impacted by the change, it's not a labor issue in terms of the changes made, but that's neither here nor there.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything that Brian said. I also recall what Representative Almy indicated, that the money is in existence now. It might not be later. And I also know that finance is loath to pass these kinds of things in an off-budget year. So it'll be up to them to decide if they want to break with that habit. But again, I think it's a finance issue. Again, as I said before, it's bizarre that we got either the bill or the amendment. Just doesn't fit, but I think we need to move it along so that it can be addressed where it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
I wouldn't want anyone messing with a labor bill in commerce or in municipal government. So I think we are obligated to pass this on to the people that will deal with it. And then if you don't like it, you can vote against it on the floor. Any other additional comments? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, the motion on the floor is ought to pass on the amendment 2022-1489S. Would you please call the roll?
Is the vote right now on the amendment or the bill?
The amendment.
Okay, it just sounded like it was both. Just wanted
Sorry,
to
just on the
clarify.
amendment.
Seaworth,
Yes.
Avaloni, Callum, not here. Myself, yes. Love, not here. Warden,
No.
Turcott, oh, not here. Prout,
No.
Boyd,
No.
Huff,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Susie,
Yes.
Perudy. Oh, not here, sorry. Cahill, Di Silvestro, Schmidt.
No, I guess she left.
Oh, she left. Okay, sorry. Didn't see. Toomey, Bouchard,
Yes.
Adjutant,
Yes.
Manable,
Yes.
Infantine.
Yes. Motion's passed and open to further amendment. Representative Seaworth,
I'd like to make the motion ought to pass as amended.
second by Representative Linda. Your the motion's on the floor and it's seconded.
It was 12-4. You're recognized to speak to your motion.
I don't think I have much more to add. I'd urge my colleagues to pass this along and get it to finance where it can be dealt with appropriately.
Representative Di Silvestro, Representative Sullivan. Okay, the motion on the floor is ought to pass as amended. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Seaworth,
Yes.
Avalani. Callum, not here. Myself, yes. Love, not here. Warden,
No.
Prout,
No.
Boyd,
No.
Huff,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Susie,
Yes.
Rudy. Oh, not here, sorry. Cahill,
Yes.
Di Silvestro. Toomey, Bouchard,
Yes.
Adjutant,
Yes.
Manable,
Yes.
Infantine,
Yes.
12-4 again.
Motion passes 12-4. Is there any other business in front of this committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Addison.
Thank you. I just want one quick second to pass this around.
Representative Addison is proposing an amendment to one of the bills that was that we heard today. And you can discuss it with him out of committee if you'd like. I will make sure it gets to everyone who's not here. Sure. This has to do with one of the bills that we passed the committee and died on the floor. Has to do with productivity quotas. So 1 minute, Josh.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is the language from HB 1076. This amendment seeks to add that language to SB 209. Per precedent, it is amending the same section of the RSA. So that has that continuity there. I appreciated the across the aisle work that we were able to do on the original bill. So this is an amendment that I hope to move forward with next week. I will be speaking with the Senate sponsors to see if they have any concerns, provided it gets to a committee of conference and passes on the floor. So that's where this is at. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. We didn't have a super long debate on this in the executive session. The entire debate was myself thanking the chairman for the good faith negotiations that we did on that bill. So I'm hoping that this will have some good compromise in the final passage of 209 in the committee. And that's what I have. So.
There were a lot of great comments, great questions today. You've talked about a number of things if you'd like to amend. OLS is really busy, so if you're going to do something, try to get it to them very quickly so it'll be available for all of us to see before Wednesday's executive session. Mr. Vice Chairman, do you have anything for the committee? Any other committee members have any comments of the chair? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming today, guys and ladies.
You will come to find, Mr. Chairman, that simply saying a Democratic senator supported something is not enough to earn my interest, especially with these Democratic senators.
Exactly the same. All right,
Yeah.
don't throw me a bone or anything.
So,